Mr. Rao, as a KM consultant, you have the opportunity to work with various companies across multiple sectors. So, how is KM being adopted in all of these sectors, in various sectors? And are there any leaders or are there any laggards? So, can you tell us a little more about
Sure. I've been consulting for about 7 or 8 years in the field of knowledge management, and I would say each sector brings with it something different to the way they do KM. For instance, IT companies have a very fast product life cycle. They're very project oriented in the case of software and services. They are very good at using tools because they all have pretty much the same intranet, the same kind of workflow tools. They've also a very fast business cycle. They're very global in their approach, etc. Whereas, for instance, media companies are much more content management centric. Their KM is more focused on how to share different kinds of information assets, how to build digital libraries, how to get information on the fly very quickly, how to mobilize news in different ways, etc. Public sector organizations, again, very different culture. They don't have the private sector culture of move fast, get the results out. It must have a bottom line contribution, it should become more profitable. So public sector government agencies are a bit more about leadership, about project management. The life cycle may not be that fast, but they're very important agendas. They manage the electricity grid of India. They manage the police security network in Singapore, etc. So their profit is not the main motive, but more performance, citizen comforts, etc. Then you would have, for instance, the tourism agencies. Their focus again is very different. It is how to mobilize very quickly when there is a crisis outside, change the tourism message with each particular year. So the way they use KM, the reason why they have KM is very different. So the flavor is completely different. I would say even within a sector, you find many differences in the way companies approach KM. You would think by now, after 15 years of KM, everybody is doing the same thing in KM, but you'd be surprised. The culture of the organization makes a difference. The kind of tools they have makes a difference. I think companies who are starting now in KM have it much better way as compared to companies who started off KM 15 years ago. Now there's a wealth of case studies, there's a wealth of tools, there's many events where you can go and learn, many courses where you can study. So I would say if you look at what's happening now, it's much easier now for companies to get into KM. The case is much stronger, the tools are much more widely available, etc. So I would say among the leaders, definitely if you look at, for instance, the MAKE Awards, Most Admired Knowledge Enterprise, these are sort of like the Oscars of the knowledge management world. So when I did my first KM book, I was wondering what sector should I focus on in my first KM book. And I began to look at all the categories of the MAKE Award winners. And I noticed IT and services is first in terms of number of winners in MAKE, globally or Asia-wide or country-wide, followed by energy of the shells, BPs of the world, which unfortunately is not doing them much good if you look at right now what's happening with the oil spill and all that stuff, but that's another story. Manufacturing is also pretty strong. Consulting, the likes of McKinsey, Accenture, they're always consistent big winners. And if you look at public sector kind of agencies, I don't see much of a government performance over there, showcase over there. But I think the World Bank consistently comes through. And that is not a for-profit company. It's a bank, it's a knowledge repository of expertise, etc. But they also do KM very well. So I would say leaders definitely are IT and government agencies, especially parts of the world like Asia, Latin America, are not doing that much. But here and there you see certain exceptions. For instance, one of the new books that's coming out later this year is about knowledge management in Singapore. And there you'll be surprised, they have the annual KM Singapore Awards. All the finalists in the last 2 years are government and public sector agencies, not private sector. So there the government seems to have got the knowledge message very clearly. They see KM as something for better performance, better citizen satisfaction, etc. So they've got the KM message very well. So just as you generalize and say maybe IT companies are the leaders and government are the laggards, you'll also see some government agency who are the leaders. I would say maybe looking at other sectors, agriculture and agribusiness also could do a lot with knowledge management. And there are also these intermittent activities which happen only once in a while where knowledge management could be used very heavily. For instance, only recently there has been a knowledge management committee for the Commonwealth Games. So now each time they set up the whole infrastructure, they launch the games, all that stuff, there's a whole bunch of best practices, worst practices, all that. And now they're transferring that from one Commonwealth Games to the next. So I think something like this should happen for the Olympics, it should happen for the World Cup, it should happen for any games happening in India, anywhere else. Pass on the best practices. So also with the elections, each time there's an election, one government comes in, another one goes out.
Right.
A lot of knowledge is lost.